were you 1 year ago? Probably at home and not by choice. I'm Kalina Estrinos. It's been a full year now since Las Vegas shut down because of the pandemic, and you know what happened next. Life went virtual, jobs disappeared, kids learned from home, and the always vibrant Las Vegas scene took a massive hit. So what now? That's what we'll be looking at in this next half hour. Welcome to Lights Out, the week that changed Las Vegas.
Well, a year this week, we all became well aware of the coronavirus global pandemic during health and public social distancing. But for the first time in history, the Las Vegas Strip went dark, devastating our tourism industry, resulting in job loss and leaving many people in dire straits. But there is new hope tonight. And tonight, we speak with Clark County Commission Chairwoman Marilyn Kirkpatrick about when the lights went out.
What were your thoughts at that time?
So it was a very scary time. Our number one thought was public health. We have to ensure that people are safe and that we can figure out what this virus means to us.
How have we changed on the Las Vegas Strip since COVID-19 became a reality?
We beat every single odd that they threw at us. So they said in the beginning the Strip could never reopen if it was ever closed. The Strip was open this weekend and we're not quite at 50. We just got to 50% capacity, but people were there. People were coming. They said that we couldn't get kids back into school this year, and we now are starting to get kids back into school. So I think that as a community, we've melded together in this hard time, and we have, just rolled up our sleeves to figure out what do we got to do next in order to ensure that people are safe and that we can still have an economy.
As of today, how much of the county is vaccinated?
So as of today, about, I think it's 22% is vaccinated. We're almost to 500,000 first doses. But remember, we're a population of about 4 million, and about 500,000 of those are children under the age of 16.
And speaking of conventions, that's such a lifeline here, and so many businesses rely on that, small businesses here in our valley. What are your plans to allow them to return when the county takes over the COVID control protocols?
What I can tell you is vaccines are very important. Keeping our positivity rate down is also very important. So we are working through that process now. I can't tell you what it'll look like May 1st. Because things change, but we want to give some stability, and we're working to make that happen.
In a year from now, looking forward, knowing all the stats that you know, schools, gaming, the Strip, housing, what's the forecast?
We're not going to recover overnight. So it is going to take us a few years to get back on track with that recovery. It's a slow, steady recovery for us in Clark County and across the state, and I think that we'll be better for it.
Full year into this pandemic, and to this day, 13 Investigates is still getting complaints about DETR, the state's unemployment agency. And so all week long, we are examining different aspects of how this past year has changed Las Vegas. And right now, 13 Chief Investigator Darcy Spears examines a new problem with misinformation and also the ongoing issue of people relying on luck in a game they can't afford to lose.
The misinformation is coming from all angles. A March 2nd email telling a claimant unemployment insurance funds have all exhausted.
It is inaccurate to say that the UI claims funds are exhausted.
A phone call where a DETR rep tells another claimant extended benefit money approved in December hasn't gone out yet.
Right now, we're waiting on the feds to tell us how to implement those additional 11 weeks. All right, so until the feds can tell us how to implement them, we're not able to get people paid.
People started getting paid weeks ago.
What can we say to people who are getting wrong information or can't get a straight answer?
I would say that I wish that this system were not so complicated.
Dieter Director Elisa Cafferata says there have been so many changes to unemployment insurance programs that they're having trouble keeping staff caught up. The phone call recorded by claimant David Hefferon is a case in point.
The most difficult part is not getting direct answers, not knowing what next week holds, bills coming up. Makes me sick to my stomach every day, not knowing when I'm going to get paid.
David is among thousands of claimants still waiting on the $300 weekly benefit extension approved by the federal government at the end of December. The 11-week time frame has come and gone, but many have seen no money.
Having no issues the whole year up until January 5th is when I received my last payment from Dieter.
The agency has rolled out some payments, but is doing so in batches.
I just wanted to get some answers, so I asked some simple questions. Just asked what was going on. He said he had no ideas. Crystal ball broke.
You heard that right. Listen in.
And you don't have a definitive timeline?
I sure don't. My crystal ball broke yesterday.
I felt like it was very insensitive, for sure, because, I get they're going through a lot of stress, but, at least he's getting his job. He has a job he's getting paid. He's paying his bills. He's not stressing out in the same way we are right now.
In the particular case of, when can I expect my extended benefits that are rolling out in batches, the challenge is, and maybe we just need to train our callers to say this, there is not any way for us to figure out when in the sort of lineup of the batches you will fall, because we're going from oldest to newest claims. And it just depends on how many other things are going through the system, how many other updates we're doing, what else is happening. And so, I can't even give people an estimate of when their batch will be processed because the system is just not designed to do that.
Tough to hear for people living on borrowed time when it comes to making ends meet.
I do my filing, I apply for jobs, try to go to every interview that comes my way, and it's not an easy market right now when there's thousands of people applying for every job at a time.
The Dieter rep David spoke to didn't know anything about the payment batches.
Is there gonna be any more batches going out soon?
What do you mean by batches?
We've reported on them, Dieter has spoken about them, and people paid in the first batch have posted in Facebook support groups.
It's on Facebook, so that must make it true, right? Well, from where I sit, I haven't been told anything about batches or people getting paid under the EUC, so.
Cafferata says computer coding issues have complicated Dieter's implementation of the latest round of programs, and they're trying to do a better job keeping frontline staff informed.
We are still paying out those claims in batches. Folks will get all the weeks they're eligible for, but because our code that we are dealing with is old, it's taking a while to roll that out.
It makes you not trust them at all. You can't trust anything they say. You just gotta kind of hope. And that's all you really have is hope.
Hope is a rare commodity these days for those still waiting on Dieter to deliver.
In our next half hour, as we look toward the future, you'll hear from a local claimant and a federal lawmaker who've both made it their mission to streamline Nevada's unemployment process. What will it take to get our state up to speed? Join me on Action News at 6:30. Darcy Spears, 13 Investigates.
We'll be back with more of this 13 Action News special right after the break. Welcome back to this 13 Action News special, Lights Out, the week that changed Las Vegas. To check out all of our reporting from this year, as well as a look at where we stand currently and what's ahead for our city, just visit ktnv.com/lightsout.
The Fortress at T-Mobile Arena is about to get really loud again. That is because the Golden Knights, they are making plans right now to reach 50% capacity next month. But new tonight, if you want to go to a game, you may need to get vaccinated. Today I spoke with the president of the Golden Knights, Kerry Bubos, and he also shared with me what the team is now considering.
A little bit more difficult in our environment because we have fixed seats. And if you still have to be 6 feet apart, if there's no place to move those chairs, then there's still some limitations there, but we're getting creative. We're thinking about different ways to expand our facility, and we'll be actually submitting new plans for the month of April.
How close do you guys think you could reasonably get to that 50% barrier, understanding that with social distancing, and as you mentioned, there are just the physical limits that you have to contend with?
I think what we're going to have to do is be a little bit more creative and think about what's happening also in our environment, which again is all very, very good news. The number of people that have been vaccinated in the state of Nevada, we're seeing numbers now that even with that first tranche or that first vaccine, it's north of 1 million people. And so in a state that's a little bit over 3 million, that's a fairly significant number of people. Beginning April 5th, as of yesterday, all people from 16 and older can get the vaccine. And so I believe part of that solution is some confirmation of vaccination as part of that element.
Yeah, I was watching, I think, the Mets and the Nationals game today, and I heard the announcers talking about with the Mets and their stadium, what they're doing is they're requiring, maybe a little bit off on this, but basically they're requiring proof of vaccination in order to enter the ballpark. Is that something, when you're talking about with vaccination, that you guys may consider?
That's exactly right. There right now, unfortunately, there's not a national database, but there is a lot of groups that are thinking about ways you can connect it with technology. Right now, we're working with Clear, the same app and process that you use at the airports for entry into T-Mobile. And one of the integrations that we're working on is an integration that would connect with our partners here locally that are doing the vaccines.
We're going to have to get those vaccination cards laminated, because they're going to be just as important as our driver's license or even our phones, I feel like, going forward.
Yeah, you just never know how this is going to evolve.
We'll be back with more of this 13 Action News special right after the break. Welcome back to this 13 Action News special, Lights Out, the week that changed Las Vegas. To check out all of our reporting from this year, as well as a look at where we stand currently and what's ahead for our city, just visit ktnv.com/lightsout.
The pandemic has put a spotlight on how education plays a big role in our community, affecting the academic growth and the mental health of our children. And as we look to the future, educators say lessons learned during this pandemic will affect how we teach our kids, from online learning to school funding.
And 13 Action News reporter Jeremy Chen right now is live at CCSD headquarters with how the future of education right now is being shaped by the pandemic. Jeremy.
Yeah, Todd and Tricia, as students are slowly being welcomed back on campus, there are questions still persisting on how they will go back to the normal routine of getting back into a classroom.
There will be a day when nearly all CCSD students will be back in the classroom, but distance learning could become a more robust option for kids. Rebecca Garcia, a CCSD parent and head of the Nevada PTA, says while online learning has not been ideal for many, some kids are thriving.
There is the desire to have that option available. It was already available in a limited form here in Clark County. But looking forward to hearing how the district's going to address that need.
Kenneth Retzel, Director of Education Policy at the Gwynn Center, believes online learning will be a big benefit for students who can function independently and have strong family connections.
It's truly a family affair when you have a student at home, as people are monitoring just to make sure everything's happening and that the student's getting their questions answered.
Distance learning, however, did present academic challenges. During the fall 2020 semester, CCSD says 90% of schools assigned more F grades than they did in the fall of 2019. However, Retzel says the lack of recent standardized testing makes it difficult to truly measure learning loss.
That without that data, you now can't see how much learning was lost during the pandemic itself, or this last, the 2021 school year.
Kristen Nigro, a kindergarten teacher at Shore Elementary School, knows she and her fellow teachers will need to do some catching up with new students.
Beginning of the year, they always do like a spiral review of like the previous year standards, just to help kind of refresh. But I think there's going to be a little bit longer.
Retzel believes there will continue to be a push for more funding in public schools with the surge in relief funds from the latest federal stimulus package.
There's been decades of studies, right, that have suggested that education funding is is vital. One, both how we distribute it and the amount that we do distribute.
Now, everyone we interviewed pretty much agreed that whether or not CCSD is forced to shut down schools or not is basically contingent on public health, how well we're able to curb the spread of the virus and how fast people will be able to get vaccinated. CCSD says it's focused on trying to reopen more classrooms for more students. Now, coming up tomorrow, continuing our Lights Out series, we're going to focus on the economy and tourism here in Southern Nevada. Jeremy Chen, 13 Action News.
We'll be back with more of this 13 Action News special right after the break. Welcome back to this 13 Action News special, Lights Out, the week that changed Las Vegas. To check out all of our reporting from this year, as well as a look at where we stand currently and what's ahead for our city, just visit ktnv.com/lightsout.
Well, the pandemic has tested our community here in Southern Nevada in ways very few people have ever experienced. Mask wearing and social distancing have now become everyday routines.
But tonight, right now, questions about our future. So is COVID here to stay? And also, what can be done now to prepare for the next pandemic? And 13 Action News reporter Jeremy Chen is live for us tonight at Southern Hills Hospital, digging for the answers to those questions and more. Jeremy.
Yeah, Todd and Tricia, certainly according to local health officials, there is some light at the end of the tunnel, especially with the fact that we are getting shots into people's arms with the COVID-19 vaccine. However, they do say there is the possibility that COVID-19 could linger into the future. However, we will be ready.
The COVID-19 pandemic has been the focus of the Southern Nevada Health District for the past year, working with local and state officials on guidelines in curbing the spread of the virus.
We have a very strong community, and we have a lot of local resources, and also
Dr. Furman Leguen, Chief Health Officer for the Southern Nevada Health District, says COVID-19 remains a new virus that continues to be studied. There is some suspicion in the scientific community we may be dealing with COVID-19 for a while.
It might be present, for years in our communities. Of course, not at the degree that we are seeing now, but perhaps more kind of similar to what happened with the flu.
As more is known about the virus, the efforts to vaccinate Nevadans will continue.
Without it, we don't go back to normal. If we can get enough of our population vaccinated, we can start to reopen our city and reopen the country and go back to the events we had before COVID.
Dr. Brian Labus with UNLV says this would mean getting herd immunity from the virus, which would be about 70% or more of Americans getting the shot.
It's a bit of a challenge to reach, considering that kids make up 22% of the U.S. population and they're not eligibly vaccinated yet.
Dr. Leguen says he believes there should be a focus on adequately funding public health in order to have programs in place to respond to future disease outbreaks. He says local health districts across the country, including SNHD, have been historically underfunded and understaffed. During the pandemic, SNHD received a surge in funding from the state and federal governments to respond to the pandemic.
What will happen after the pandemic? Because that's what the question is. Now, you really need funding to keep your staff ready to respond to anything.
And doctors are continuing to ask people to keep on wearing your masks and social distance while in public, including if you've been fully vaccinated. Now, coming up tomorrow, continuing our Lights Out series of stories, we will be focusing on how COVID-19 has affected education here in Clark County in the past, present, and future. Jeremy Chen, 13 Action News.
All right, Jeremy, thank you for that. In the meantime, COVID-19 is also changing surgery. The American Society of Anesthesiologists, or ASA, says that it is likely that you will be required to have a negative test before surgery for the foreseeable future. There's also no evidence that COVID or the vaccines interfere with anesthesia. It does recommend waiting 4 to 12 weeks to have surgery if you recently recovered from COVID-19, and that you should also talk to your surgeon or doctor about if you should wait to get vaccinated before getting surgery.
The medical system in Nevada came close to fracturing at the beginning of this pandemic, and officials raced to increase hospital capacity and avoid having to ration care. Researchers also jumped into action, helping keep hospitalizations down. One huge advancement was the development and use of multi-COVID antibody cocktails. Monoclonal therapies like Regeneron or IV infusions, helping infected patients' immune systems ramp up. Nurses and doctors remember charging into the pandemic nearly blind.
We're cautious and nervous, but we knew we had a job to do.
That was at a time when we didn't really have any known treatments available.
And the most monumental achievement to date is the development of multiple highly effective vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna to Johnson & Johnson.
And 13 Investigates reporter Joe Bartels now has a look back at the second the world really changed and also what lies ahead now for Las Vegas.
Nevada is getting back to business. Most places can operate at 50% capacity. That includes casinos, as long as the businesses can ensure proper social distancing. But quite a difference, the gradual return to normalcy after 1 year of the shutdown.
It was the day the Strip stood still. Iconic places known the world over, closed, barricaded, emptied. Visitors vanished like a Las Vegas magic trick. The lucrative convention business also disappeared in the blink of an eye. With all that went the jobs so many depend on.
The unthinkable happened on that day from an economic perspective.
In the months that followed, bikes replaced the busy traffic on the Strip, and out-of-work people struggled.
This is something I've never experienced before, and I feel like a lot of Americans are the same way. This is something we've never gone through.
Right now, the struggle continues. Some are still fighting for unemployment benefits. The massive backlog persists.
When we look at initial unemployment insurance, they were doubled, tripled, quadrupled more than anything that we had ever seen, and it happened overnight.
Hope that normalcy is returning. Now businesses can operate at 50% capacity. Large events can be held if given approval. The mega convention, World of Concrete, just given the green light to return in June.
Not only is this a big day for Las Vegas to be welcoming its first major citywide show back, but it's also the first major show in the country.
10 more conventions are now part of the conversation for later this year, a sign that Las Vegas is getting back to business for the future.
But that opens the doors to let all the conventions know that business is once again open in Las Vegas.
But experts predict it will likely take up to 1.5 years for Las Vegas to fully recover, and even then, some jobs are gone for good, a lasting symptom of the pandemic that changed everything.
By what measure would we know that Las Vegas is quote-unquote back? What would you be looking for?
Look, I mean, it's going to be difficult because it's going to be back for some people and not back for others, right? Most fundamentally, we want to see the jobs come back. We want to see that unemployment rate below 6%.
Still, there's hope on the horizon. This summer, Fremont Street Experience expecting it to be unprecedented. Pent-up demand, cash in Americans' pockets, and loosening restrictions with vaccinations ramping up are all bright signs for Las Vegas.
Entertainment and shows are making a comeback. Too many to mention, but really up and down the Strip, many have either returned or have announced dates that they will be returning. And of course, 1 year later, things getting back to normal. Joe Bartels, 13 Action News.
Thanks for joining us here on 13 Action News Special Lights Out, the week that changed Las Vegas. Now, if you miss any part of this program, just push the back button on your remote and scroll down until you see KTNV Digital Exclusives. There you'll find this and all the specials we publish every single week. Stay tuned for more from 13 Action News after the break, and check us out anytime on KTNV streaming Las Vegas News on your time.